Let's take a look at some information charts on Avax for BraveNewCoin. Avax or Avalanche is a proof of stake chain that to me is more DAG-like, more IOTA-like than anything that we've seen thus far. Maybe this will be an IOTA that'll actually work and not crumble under its own weight like IOTA has a history of doing. But in any case, you'll see all sorts of interesting stats and things and discussions whether or not this is a blockchain or a DAG, and people talking about all sorts of TPS, transactions per second. And ultimately, I think it's just too early. It's too early to see if there's a winner. You know, if you want to invest, gamble, whatever you want to call it, into this sort of thing, cool. The incentives are there for Yak and DVL and DeFi farming, and I'll get to that at the end. But it's just super early still on a lot of this stuff. They have done a seed sale, a staking sale, a token sale. They've had 3 sales now at this point. This was the initial supply. I don't know the specific supply schedule as far as who's locked up till when, but we can sort of get a roundabout idea as far as it's currently almost, we'll say, October 2021. So they have just under, looks somewhere around 250 million. And that's going to keep increasing over time. So they're going to be fighting, the price is going to be fighting that supply over time. So they really need usage and incentives to continue to ramp up to absorb this supply. Even if it's not being sold, it exists in the circulating supply calculations at that point, right? And they do have a roadmap. Nothing yet for 2022, but you know, if you're deep into this, you can dig into all the different chains and all the different side chains and side DAGs. I don't know what they call them exactly, but wallets and bridges, and that's really the biggest thing. It's bridging in layer 1. As long as ETH remains expensive for the average user, they're going to go elsewhere, and you can't blame them. They're just doing what they should be doing and voting with their dollars. If it's cheaper to do exactly what they do on ETH elsewhere, risk adjusted and attack surface adjusted and all that other stuff, then they're going to do it elsewhere. And that's been the theme lately for layer 1 competition, other proof of stake stuff. On their website, they also talk about the classic DeFi stuff, AMMs, borrowing and lending, DEXs. They talk about NFTs. They talk about digital identity. You know, they check all the boxes as far as this chain can do all these things, where we have all these proof of concepts or working projects, right? And the NFT stuff is real, specifically with Tops, right? The identity stuff maybe a little bit less so, and the DeFi stuff I'll get to in a second. As far as the consensus, I was reading over this after the last video and talking with somebody else, and we both were like, yeah, this kind of looks like IOTA, like I mentioned, where it's just like everything comes together in the tangle and then figures itself out. Now, I'm sure it's much different than that, and people may be offended by my comparisons, both the IOTA team and the Avalanche teams, but to the layman such as myself, that's what it looks like. It is a DAG. They call it a DAG, dicyclic something graph. I forget the exact. Yeah, directed acyclic graph. That's what it is. We haven't seen too many of these do well as far as I know. So we'll see if the consensus breaks down over time, because that's what IOTA has a history of doing. There are staking parameters here as far as a minimum number of AVAX and a minimum amount of time to stake, minimum delegation fee. So there are a bunch of rules here as far as validators and what you need to do to become a validator or to stake. And it looks like total stake is around 249 million of around 350 million, from what I can tell, is in circulating, even though they say it's a 63% circulating or staking to circulation ratio. So the circulating supply numbers in my head are a bit fuzzy, but a vast majority of the coins available are circulating coins are being staked currently. And they are getting around a 3% reward after inflation, which isn't too bad. To run a validator, you get slightly better than that, 3.5%. And that's on par with stablecoins, honestly. So if you have a risk appetite, if you want to be exposed to volatility, as opposed to lending USDC on Aave Maker, Compound, whatever, you can participate in AVAX through a validation, a node, or through staking. If you look at the TVL has continued to increase. TVL is kind of a joke of a metric. It's heavily incentive based, which is fine, but you can't say, look at us, we've got all this TVL, we are the new paradigm, because you're just incentivizing people to send TVL places. And it's working because fees are low, right? And that's fine, but you have to understand this isn't just some carte blanche stamp seal of approval that we're the best chain because our TVL is increasing. Anyway, that's my diatribe on TVL. So they do have a growing number of DeFi everything, right? We saw this for BSC, we saw this for Solana, Polygon, right? Look at all of these coins on DeFi or chains on DeFi Llama now. It's just an endless list. There used to be 3 or 4. Now there's probably like 30. So you're seeing a rapid expansion of incentivized programs to get people to use a chain to pump that TVL. Liquidity begets liquidity, TVL begets TVL, so long as there are incentives to support that TVL. And very clearly, that seems to be the case. One of the popular ones is Yak that I hear about. Auto compounding is big. You don't have to use the interest that you've gained to move it again back into the contract. It just does it automatically. With ETH, this would be super expensive. With something like Avalanche, not so much. So it's early. I encourage everybody who wants to experiment with this stuff. You may find gold mine. You may lose all your money. I don't know. But it's here. It's there. Everyone's talking about it and doing the thing. And most importantly, the token itself is mooning with price sitting what is essentially at all-time highs. On the alligator fractal stuff, which is what I have here, VPVR, RSI, you're getting a rising price in a tighter and tighter wedge with falling RSI. So to me, arguably, this is a potential reversal setup with a rising wedge. Obviously, anybody who's long Avax is going to be shaking in their chair hearing this because this means that I'm bearish, expecting a reversal here. Let's say I'm wrong. Let's say this rising wedge breaks up like some of them often do. Then you're talking probably easily 100 plus from here, right? If it breaks down, support's around 33. There's support at 50, 35, 30, right? All this volume is support. The previous area here should act as support. I think really it comes down to incentives in the circulating supply. Can it be soaked up where people are still buying and sending it into these programs for whatever reason, right? Joe, I hear a lot about that as well. That's mooning. If these underlying tokens do well, Avax should do well. TVL should continue to increase. All these things snowball off of each other. But this chart does look rising wedgy to me. The 5200 is also showing support at 30. So a decent guess for support if this does break down is 30. Otherwise, you can measure the 1618 measure move from 37 to 67 or 77, whatever it is, to the upside. I think if BTC and ETH do well, this probably will do well as well. So it probably won't be mega bearish. It probably won't hit 30. If everything else goes flat or down, then AVAX probably takes a hit as well. Although, you might want to look at the correlations there to see what's really been happening. It's tough because this stuff hasn't correlated with anything, So to be bearish on ETH and bullish AVAX almost makes more sense than to be bearish on both of them. I just think if BTC and ETH pull back in bigger ways than they already have, everything's probably going to take a hit from that. Tons of volume here coming in lately on Binance for the USD pair. And the Cloud loves it. Cloud likes support at around 46 based on the Kijun, but the last Kijun bounce propelled this thing higher from 34. So that worked out. And at this point, you're still up like 7x from the bottom if you're holding. Let's be less generous and say 5x from somewhere near the bottom. So if the incentives align, this thing can keep going. But otherwise, people who've gotten in down here, unless they're full-blown community members, are going to start taking profit more and more. Against BTC, it's also done extremely well. Trend metrics still bullish. Some support at 9K sats and 5K sats. Kind of rising wedges, kind of choppy up chop, right? But there is a subtle bear div, higher highs in price, lower highs in RSI here. So I think just being cautiously optimistic is okay, but the reality is it probably isn't going to keep mooning much longer. AVAX ETH as well, very similar to AVAX BTC pairs. Looks the same. You get this weird up chop, non-specific up chop, let's call it. Support around 0.15 based on volume. But I think all this stuff's early, this layer one bridging stuff, and people are just FOMOing into anything that has incentives, that has low fees. That may work out in the long run. It may not. We'll see if we're talking about AVAX in 5 years' time. Right now, a lot of people seem to be enjoying playing around in that ecosystem. Last, I'll just mention the ETH BTC fund and DeFi portfolio I trade for Techemy Capital and Enzyme.finance. a non-custodial portfolio management tool where you can send Ether, USDC, or just watch what I'm doing. You can see everything, including AUM performance, allocation, all the vaults I'm in on Yearn, Comp, and Aave, as well as the trades in the trades tab down below. And hopefully one day this stuff as well goes multi-chain. Currently it's just on ETH, but if this goes to Solana or Terra or wherever else, it certainly makes my job as the trader or the DEX person, right? Makes it much cleaner, simpler, faster, cheaper, and a better experience for people coming in and out of stuff like this. That's all I have. If you like, dislike, comment, share, subscribe, and happy trading.